Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar, Optimize Sencha Ext JS Apps using Sencha Command. My name is Marc Gusmano. I am a sales engineer with Sencha. And in this session, we are going to go through what Sencha Command is, how you use it, actually how you use it through the entire life cycle of an application, from generating your initial application through development, then to testing, and then finally to production and deployment of your application. So we'll use Sencha Command for every one of those steps. We will go about 15 or 20 minutes or so with some content, very demo oriented. And once we're done, we're going to take any questions that we have. If you do have questions, please put them in the question section of the GoToWebinar application. We are also recording this, so if you would like to review it later or have your colleagues take a look, that will be available as well. So with all of that, let's go ahead and get started. So our agenda is first off to talk about what Sencha Command is, why it exists, how it relates to Sencha Ext JS. Once we do that, I will talk about how you acquire Sencha Command. And then, as I said, we'll get into a demonstration of the life cycle of a development project using Sencha Command. We'll start out by creating a new application. We'll then do some development. We'll look at what that process is all about, how Sencha Command works into that process. We'll then create a testing build of our project. We'll talk about what a testing build is and how it relates to a development build, and then finally a production build. We'll build a production build of our application and then simulate hosting on a production web server and what that means from your application's point of view. We'll actually also use Sencha Command to simulate that production server. It has those capabilities as well. So as I said, I think the easiest thing to do is to do demonstration. But before we go into that, let's talk about what Sencha Command is. So Sencha Command is a command line tool that specifically works, as I said, in the life cycle of building an Ext.js project. Prior to version 5, Sencha Command existed, but wasn't very well used. But since version 5, we've really used Sencha Command as a way to help productivity, to promote best practices, to rapidly build a production environment. So Sencha Command is really the recommended way to build your application nowadays. So the first thing you're going to want to do is get a copy of Sencha Command. And there are really two ways to do it. One of the ways is to try XJS in the form of a trial. So if you go to the trial evaluation page and get the 30-day trial, you simply just need to fill in this form. What will be downloaded to you will be a setup executable of Sencha Command. So if you went to the documentation and looked at the documentation for getting started with zip, this would lead you through what you do with that file when you download it. So you acquire and download the file, you unzip it, and then click on it, and it will start a sequence of dialogues. The dialogues are an installer that will install Sencha Command onto your machine and into your path. So typically you just click next through all of these screens. Next, next, next. It's asking where you're going to install it, what extensions you want. Typically you take the defaults. And when you are finished, you will have Sencha Command on your machine. So the trial is one way to get access. The other way to get access is through the support portal, and the support portal is available at support.sencha.com. So let me go ahead and go there. So support.sencha.com. In the support.sencha.com, there is a downloads section. And one of the things you can download, as you can see here, is Sencha Cmd. So that's simply clicking this download button. If you are using the support portal, you are likely also going to download a version of the framework. And that's, in this case, the latest version being 7.70. So you download that. You typically put that in a folder somewhere and use Ext JS from your local environment. There is an option, and I'll talk about that option, to acquire the framework from the cloud. But if you're a licensed user, you typically have the application locally. So once you've installed Sencha Cmd, the easiest way to know if you have it and installed correctly is to go to a command prompt and type Sencha. If you have it, you'll see something similar to this. You'll see the version number, you'll see a little bit of high-level help, you'll see options, and this just confirms that indeed Sencha Cmd is in your path, what version you have, and you should be ready to go. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we're going to do in the life cycle is generate an application. And the Sencha Cmd tool gives us a way to do that. In particular, the Sencha generate app. So this will generate an app like it infers. There are a couple of options to this. This option here is the SDK. So I've installed from the support portal the 7.7 version of Ext JS onto my hard drive. So I can specify by doing a dash SDK. If you do a dash ext, that's the one that would acquire it from the cloud. But I'm going to do a dash SDK. After generate app, I specify which toolkit I want to use. There are two toolkits in the Ext JS environment, modern and classic. And this is kind of nonsensical here. I want to create a classic app. Oops, let's fix that here. I want to create a classic app, so let's name it classic app, or else I'll get real confused. So classic app. And then this last parameter is what folder you want to put it in. And I always put it in the same named folder so I know where my projects are. So if I go ahead and run this, as you can see here, Sencha Cmd gets started. It's copying the framework from where I told it into a folder called Ext in my project. Notice it's creating a folder called Classic App because that's what I told it to do. It's loading some miscellaneous things that it needs. It's getting everything ready to run from the standpoint of an application. And once it's finished, as you can see here, it ends and puts me back at the command prompt. So if I take a look at what got generated, I got a folder named Classic App generated. So I'm going to CD into Classic App. And what's in this folder is a set of folders and files that make up your application. The easiest way to look at those folders and files is through an IDE or an editor. And I use Visual Studio Code. So I'll use a little shortcut here, code dot, to open up Visual Studio Code in the context of that folder. And as you can see here, I can see the folder structure. It has several files on the root, has an app folder, build folder, ext folder. Ext is where the SDK was installed. You saw that when it was running. So this is my running, or this is not my running app. This is my generated app. So once I've generated, and I only have to generate my app once, I can go ahead and create a runnable version of my app, which is done with another Sencha command called Sencha App Watch. So what Sencha App Watch does is it watches the folder that you're in as you make changes. I've already got something in use. All right, let me find where I'm doing that, and we'll fix that. I think it was actually a port. we'll do this. This is another option that you have for Sencha Command. You can say port, we'll say 2023. So there's a default port that is used for Sencha Command. It's 1841. If you're running Sencha Command somewhere else, and I'm running it somewhere on my machine, it will give you that error address already in use, but you can always use a different port number, which I'm using 2023. FYI, this error right here is a known error and will be solved and is being solved currently in 7.8. It's nothing to be worried about. When I'm running and I get to the point where I'm waiting for changes, I'm ready to test my application from a development point of view, or I'm ready to start doing development. So I'm sitting here and essentially Sencha Command has created a web server at port, in this case, 2023. So if I go to localhost 2023 and hit enter, there's my application. There's my running classic template default application. If I hit F12 here and I look at the network tab and I run this, you'll notice, if I click on all here, you'll notice that I get a lot of files that are downloaded. All these files are the individual files from the Sencha Ext JS SDK. The reason these individual files are showing up is that it makes debugging so much easier. If there's an error, it'll tell you what file and what line number of that file. This is obviously not the way we want to deliver the application to production. We want one minified, obfuscated file, and I'll talk about how you do that. But let's go through a little bit of the development effort here. So I'm going to leave that page up and try as best I can to put my developer environment on the right-hand side and put the application on the left-hand side here. And you notice here I have a tabbed menu, and home brings up this personnel grid. So I go through the app folder, open up view, and look at list here. List happens to be that personnel grid. So you can see here it's instantiating a grid panel. It has a title of personnel. So I'm going to change the title. I'm just going to change that title right there. And I currently have autosave set on my browser. So I want to bring this Sencha App Watch to the forefront. I'm going to change this to my initials. It saves. Notice what happens to Sencha App Watch. Sencha App Watch detected a change and reran and is now ready to run the application. If I go to the browser and refresh the page, indeed, there's my change. So development with the environment is typically done with Sencha App Watch, and then Sencha App Watch lets you dynamically see new changes. All right. So once I'm done and I'm maybe ready for some testing, or I have a testing team that's testing as I'm committing my changes, I want to run the next Sencha command, which is Sencha App Build Testing. Sencha App Build Testing will build a testing version of my project. So if I come over to the code here and I look, there's a build folder with a testing folder underneath it. And when this is finished, I will have a testing version of my application that I can give to a testing team. What is a testing version? A testing version is a version that has gathered all of the needed files, concatenated them together, all the JavaScript files, but has not minified and obfuscated that file. So it's one file, it's close to what production is going to look like, but it's not minified. So if errors occur in testing, at least I will get a line number of that one minified file. So if I look at this folder, the entirety of this folder is the testing app, and there's only one JavaScript file. It's this huge app.js file. If I scroll down, you'd see a lot of things in it. So it has the entire used items of the framework. So Sencha Command will figure out what I'm using and just give me those items. and it has my business application in it. Next thing I can do is test my testing app. I'm going to go ahead and open up a terminal window where that testing app was built. So typically it's build, testing, and then the name of my app. I'm now going to use Sencha Cmd to emulate my development testing server. So Sencha web port, we'll say 2025, start. And this can be done against any folder that has a web application in it. So basically what I just said is run a web server at port 2025. Now remember, when I ran this at port 2023 in development, I got a lot of files. I'm gonna go ahead and run the same app at port 2025. Notice I get a lot less files. I get one file, but it's pretty big. It's the app.js file right here, and it's currently 2.8 meg. If I open it up and look at it, it's that same file that I was looking at. But this is how I can test my application where it's very close to being a production app. It's got one file. If I'm missing things, it'll tell me I'm missing things. So I tend to use the testing version until I'm pretty sure that it's ready for production. Also notice that every time I hit this, I am doing a 200, which means I'm going to get the files, which is not efficient for production either. I want to be able to cache those files. So the last step, once I'm ready for production, is to go into the same place I was before, the root of my application, and do Sencha app build production. Production is actually the default. So all I really need to say is Sencha app build. So Sencha app build production, again, will bring up the folder, the build folder, but this time it will create, and it's running, it'll create a production folder here. There it is. Underneath that production folder, it will create my app, classic app, there it is. And if I go ahead and, again, open this in my integrated terminal in Visual Studio Code, now I'm at the production folder. Same thing is true. I do have only one file, but if I look in the production folder and look at the app.js here, it is a minified, there's only one line number because this is a minified file. Everything is on line number 1. So any error you're going to get is going to say line 1. That's why you like the testing version, because at least gives you some context. I'm going to do another Sencha app build, or Sencha web port, let's say 2028. Oops, not port. And start. And now at port 2028, instead of me having one file that is non-minified and obfuscated, I am going to have one file that is minified and obfuscated. So if I refresh here, there's my one line number. Chrome kind of breaks out the file, but there's only one line number. So now I have a minified, obfuscated file. And if I refresh, notice what's happening. Instead of 200s, I'm getting 304s, which means it brought the file down to the client browser and cached it. So I get blazingly fast performance because hardly anything is being retrieved from the server, 62 bytes. That's about it. So that really represents the life cycle of Sencha Cmd and how you use it. And it's as simple as I showed you. It's just making sure you use the right commands and follow them in the right order. So with that, let me come back to the slides and just wrap up, and we will move over to questions and answers. As you saw, the best way to try this, if you're not a current customer, is to go ahead and get a trial. The trial is very much focused on Sencha Cmd. That's the one file that you get downloaded. You get a full-featured version of the framework, all the tools that support the environment, kitchen sink examples, documentation, it's all there. We also have social media if you want to learn more about either Sencha Command or the tooling itself. And one other thing we have that I would encourage you to be a part of is a Sencha Discord server. So it's a chat server where you can ask questions, you can interact with MVPs. It's all categorized. It's available to anyone, customers and non-customers, if you're evaluating the product. Again, I would encourage you to get into that. If you have questions or you need some help, either send me an email or send your sales rep an email and we'll get you up and running. So with that, I'm going to see if we have any questions. Again, if you have anything that you want to talk specifically about, feel free to email me. My email address is on the screen. I'd be happy to talk with you. With that, I will turn it back and see, gentlemen, do we have any questions?
Great. Thanks, Mark. It looks like we have a few questions that have been submitted. Let's get started with the first one here. How to use Sencha Cmd with an app that was not created with it?
Great question. Yeah, like I said, Sencha Command was not really a thing in earlier versions of the framework. So people basically came up with a Sencha Command-like environment. If you're not using Sencha Command, what you're probably using is one of the all files, so ext modern all.js, which is the entire framework in one file, and you probably put that file in your script tag in HTML, or you've come up with a way to do the equivalent, as I said, of Sencha Command. The best way to get into a Sencha Command environment, if you've followed the pattern of putting one Sencha class in a file, is to generate an app, just like I did, and copy your files into the right places in the structure of the Sencha Command environment. That, to me, is the most efficient. It doesn't take long, especially if you have a similar folder structure. So that would be my suggestion of exactly how you would do that. Any follow-up on that from anybody who asked, please feel free to do so.
Great. Thank you, Mark.
Yep.
So we do receive this question via email. Again, I'm just going to have a follow-up here.
Okay.
We have issues development versus testing. Is there a way to beef up the issues? If we're using like older app version 3 and version 4, now it's 7.4, right? So there may be older core, there might be some old core, right? So Sencha app watch how app works, right? So the question is like, after Sencha build and deploy, app doesn't work in certain parts.
So if you have an older version of an app and you're trying to get to the newest version, which is now version 7.7, soon to be 7.8, one thing I will point you to is the fact that we have a tool, a free tool called the Upgrade Advisor. And the Upgrade Advisor allows you to take your current app, version 4X and above, point to it, point to where you want to go. So I want to go from version 5 to version 7. And then you run what effectively is a linter, ESLint, with specific Sencha rules. And you will get a report. It'll tell you of the things that it found that are either deprecated or changed. It'll also identify overrides that you've written. And to the extent it can fix some of the things that it found, it'll give you a button that says, do you want to apply these fixes? So you can apply those fixes, and then it gets you a great start moving forward. Now, that's not going to solve everything, but it's going to give you a good start, and it's going to give you a roadmap for the things that you have to look at. For example, the overrides can't be handled because it doesn't know what you were doing, why you even wrote the override. So it'll give you that. What it won't do, it won't upgrade new features. So in a version 4 app, you've probably used global controllers. And since version 4, we've come up with a new type of controller called a view controller. View controllers are great. I would encourage moving to view controllers, but they're not automatically upgraded, and you would have to do some work to do that. So that would be my advice. Get the Upgrade Advisor, start using Sencha Command, get your application into the structure that Sencha Command is suggesting, You can also change the structure. There's a file that Sencha Command relies on called app.json in the root of your project, that if you've really come up with a different structure, you can actually apply a few configs to the app.json to make it work with your structure. So that's another piece of advice. Then finally, there is in the documentation, so docs.sencha.com, there is a section in the documentation for Sencha Command. So there's a whole set of documentation on Sencha Command if you want to do use some of the more advanced features. If you just want to better understand what it's doing, I'd encourage you to head to this documentation.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
So the next question we have here, can we integrate Sencha Command with Java servlets?
Can you use Sencha Command with Java servlets?
Yes, can you integrate with, yeah.
Well, that's an interesting question. Sencha Command, just as some background to everybody, Sencha Command is written in Java. So it is a Java app. And actually one of the things that, just like any other Java app, as new versions of Java come out and old versions are deprecated, we and our development team has to keep up to date on those. So we're currently working on that for 7.8 to get to the latest supported version of Java. In terms of extending Sencha Command, I would have to defer specifically to our engineering team, depending on what you're trying to do. If there's some particular use case you're trying to do, send me an email or get in touch with us, and we'll give you further details.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any improvement in the size of app.js with latest version of Sencha Command compared to previous version?
Say that one more time. Is there a difference in the size of app?
Yeah, so this is kind of a feedback or a question here. Is there any improvement in size of app.js with latest version of Sencha Command compared to previous version?
Well, app.js, which again includes everything you're using from the framework, trimmed out for the things you're not using, and your own app, probably hasn't gotten significantly smaller. But a couple of things along the road with Sencha Command have made the possibility of having smaller chunks available. There's a concept of dynamic package loading, where you can segment your application into different functional areas and then use Sencha Command to individually build packages. So let's say you have a 10-tab application. Maybe the first 2 tabs are always used and the last 8 are sometimes used. You can take those 8 tabs, put them in packages, make them dynamic, and then the one file, the one app.js that is created is only the 2 first tabs. So it's smaller, going to be more efficient, although as you saw, once the application is downloaded, it's cached on your machine. So it's pretty efficient anyway. But in that scenario, you can use dynamic loading to load the other tabs on demand, and you have programmatic control over that. So do a search for dynamic package loading, and you'll find some examples if you are interested in doing that.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
How can I access the data in the database located on the online server if I run Sencha Command on my computer and use local Sencha Command web server on my computer?
Yeah, that's a great question. Local Sencha Command, what I just did, is just for demo locally to test. It's not your server. It's not the server command. So you're typically going to have a database server, and then you're going to have a web server that can access that database. And in that case, you wouldn't need the Sencha web start command because your server is going to be doing that. Sencha Ext JS is totally 100% browser-based and has AJAX capabilities to make AJAX calls. That's typically what you do, is you make an AJAX call to a web server. The web server will process that AJAX call and return typically JSON data back to you. So that's really the structure of how you do that. So in that scenario, depending on, if you're in Microsoft in an IIS environment, or you're on a Linux or Ubuntu machine, whatever you might be, that server will be a web server specific to that environment. But pretty much every web server has the ability to have web services connecting to a database. So that's the approach you should use. Any other questions?
Sorry, I was talking on mute. So the next question we
That's
have,
right.
yeah, can you clarify the relationship between EXGen and Sencha Command?
Okay, so Sencha Command is a tool to be used with the framework or the SDK Ext JS. So Ext JS is the library of all of our components, all of our layout capabilities. That's the JavaScript library or JavaScript framework. Sencha Command is a tool specifically built to take advantage of, build your Sencha Ext JS application. So Sencha Command is a complementary tool for Sencha Ext JS, the SDK. So that's the difference between them. And as it was mentioned in a previous question, it is possible to build Sencha Ext JS applications without Sencha Command. It is not recommended, but it is possible. And in that case, the way you would do that is completely up to you. But Sencha Command, as you saw, automates things to make it a lot easier. Any others? Any other questions? I will take the silence as no, we don't. But like I said, if we do, or if you do have other questions, or you'd like to comment or get more details on anything I might have talked about, my email address is still up on the screen. Feel free to send me an email. We will have the recording available shortly, so look for that. And we will be continuing this sprint webinar series with other related topics to Ext JS. So if there are no other questions, I will say thank you and look forward to having you on the next webinar.
Thank you, everyone.
Mm-hmm.